All right, mate. Here we are today in our home libraries. Yours is a little bit more robust than mine, but I'm working on it. So, to talk about the evolution of change versus revolution of change, right?
Yeah, and usually we would be probably in the same city, sharing a cocktail and some desperately unhealthy food. And just full disclosure, I've not read any of those books, or very few of them anyway.
Isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think you and I, we work a lot in change, in our roles, being account management, implementations, operations, design. I've often kind of viewed how we help customers with change really much kind of split into two arms. One is the technical side of change, and that's where you're talking about building new tools and solutions and platforms for them to actually work with us on. These are things that are very tangible in nature. These are tasks. We need to build something. We need to set up something. We need to configure something. They're very tangible in nature, and they're usually part of an implementation project or an optimization of an existing customer. But they're things that we can tick off and we can see them and we know that they're complete. So once it's done, it's done. Then you kind of have the more interesting side to me of change, which is the human element of change. And I kind of think back to when you and I rolled out our project management platform in FCM a couple of years ago. Do you want to maybe talk about how that kind of came about? Because I think that's a really interesting study of how we roll change out into our business
It is.
internally.
It is a really good story, isn't it? And it kind of ended with how we are right now as a process of change management. It was a lesson, wasn't it? And they all are. And we had our objectives. We knew we had to digitize. We knew we had to get on a platform that was collaborative globally, and stop people saving things to an Excel on their desktop in a box in a box in a box.
Yeah.
And that's what we set out to do. But at the very start, when we were designing this, we knew we had to get this quantum leap into the digital space. We knew that. We kind of knew what products and platforms that were out there to select from. We did that. We chose that. What we didn't know, what was the I guess the human element of change, and what was the perfect system. Should we have sat there and said, in 5 years we're going to have this and it's going to be perfect? We did not take that approach. We didn't have. We definitely didn't take that approach, and I'm glad, because when the time comes, excuse me, things have usually changed enough that you would have been wrong 5 years prior trying to project what that was. But we got going, and what that started as was a big, ugly, 1,000-task long thing that was really hard to use. Yes, it was digital. Was it a better user experience? Probably not. Was it a pleasant change management experience for everyone around the world? Definitely not. But it was an iterative process, and it allowed us over time to get live feedback to know how to shape. I'm not going to say it's perfect now, but it's very good and it's effective, and all the end users are really engaged. And I think there's over 500 users of Reich. A year ago, I don't know what it is now.
Yeah.
It's
About 2,000 now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's broadly accepted, and using that iterative process to get feedback from the end user was critical. And I think it was such a great lesson and great, I guess, evolution of that idea into something that's tangible now. But, and I guess we'll get into this as well, the human side of that change, as we experienced, we didn't really have the process or the knowledge or insight back then that we do now, which I think is great. That's something that you sort of pulled into the process. That I guess, do you want to just sort of touch on that, how that came about, the change management process that we use now and then?
Yeah, and I think that experience internally, I think, has really shaped how we do things with customers, because of some of the challenges that we had, and we went back and looked at that and said, okay, how can we make sure that if we ever roll this out again, we do have feedback loops, that users feel engaged throughout, and And it's an interesting thing because I feel like when you're rolling out a travel program globally as well, you're making a decision on behalf of maybe thousands of people across the world. And they may not necessarily have a say in what happens, but then how do you get them engaged so they're on board with it? And that, I think, is where that human side of change is so important. So, we went away and looked at, a few different methodologies from a change management perspective that we could embed into our onboarding process and really elevate that experience for customers. We know that by and large, today in many companies, resources are tight. People don't have the time to do things themselves. How can we support a customer by taking them through something that's a little bit more scientific in nature, but also give them the flexibility so we can work within their process, within their culture, within their lines of communication, but give them everything they need in a pack. And I guess we ended up developing or working with the ADKAR methodology at FCM, which is very much about taking a customer through 5 stages of change. So putting aside all the technical elements for a moment, we know that we've got to build online booking tools and profile platforms and forms of payment integration and build back solutions and all those sorts of things. They'll get done. How do we make sure that a customer is really driving the change internally, that they build a desire for change within the organization? And by the time we go live, we really should have a very good awareness, but also a desire and a knowledge of what that change is going to look like. And it shouldn't just be a case of, the end users having absolutely zero idea until they make their first travel booking. They should kind of already know what's in it for them and how life is going to be different and hopefully better on the other side. And ADKAR really allows us to sit down with the customer in the implementation and plot out what are the different communication touch points that we really need to nail in that journey. So when we get to that go live, change is seen as a celebration and an evolution, not something that's painful.
Yeah, totally, man. And I think, talking about, the problems in the business and the solutions that we came up with, I think that story before was just, it's such a good example of what we did, the problems we found along the way, and the sort of solution that we ended up at is really kind of relevant to this story here within the implementation process, where we found exactly the same problem of the human side of change, not us implementing an internal platform like Reich, but a client implementing a new travel program. Like you said, the technical stuff gets plugged in. We've always been able to do that. That all gets connected. But then, how do you deal with people, which is always the biggest variable in any account that we onboard. And I think the ADKAR model, and that's just for everyone's sake, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but awareness, desire, knowledge, action, and reinforce. Having a methodology that there, because there is science and there is psychology behind this, but it also makes you just stop and think, okay, is it just an email that I'm going to send out to everyone and a go live date and that's it? Where we might have had a little bit of a rigid process, not really thinking about, how this is going to change people's worlds, because that's going to be your critical success factor. If you haven't sold it to the executive and it hasn't been pushed down, then are you going to get the buy-in from the users? Conversely, if you've had no experience of what the users have been doing and how their world's going to change, you're not going to get good user adoption from the users. So it's top down, it's bottom up, and I think this makes us stop and think and have a framework, so we don't really lose out any of the components that we need to think about. And the other thing that I really took from this is, we can have a standard implementation process, but every company's different. Their culture's different. It's a different size change for every single customer. They might go from using one booking tool to the same booking tool in a different TMC, or they might be completely unmanaged and coming on board new to all technology. So to actually understand, A, their pain points of why they moved on to us, but B, how big of a change is it for them? And that's so important to understand before you undertake the journey at a company level. And I also like what we've done with the introduction of personas, because that's been really successful in the account management space. And we can thank our marketing gurus for that one. But that also has allowed us to have a plan for all of these personas as we embark on this journey and bring them into our world. Because I'm not going to tell the C-level the same that I'm going to tell an end user. And we need communications for travelers, travel bookers, travel managers. And this allows us to have a communications plan that actually incorporates all these different personas, understand the changes along the journey. And then, once we go through that process, at the end, that the reinforced part of the ADCAR model is really important, because cognitive dissonance is something that everyone experiences whenever they make a change. And all of those levels need to understand and believe, and it should be fact-based that they've done a good thing. So going back and having a feedback loop, we were just talking about feedback loop separate to this conversation on an ongoing basis. Like, to have this, it's a loop called a loop for a reason, right? Like, we need to know from them, but then that needs to trigger an action for us. So we hit on this continuous improvement cycle of success for each of these personas. And I know you're big on that sort of continuous improvement philosophy, I guess, or methodology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to summarize, I would say that change is never easy. But I also would say it doesn't need to be difficult if you plan for it. And by thinking about what are your success metrics at go live, what are the things that are going to be important to you to start off with as a kind of a bit of an MVP or a minimum viable product, and how do you iterate, as you said earlier, to get there? And whilst you're doing that, as long as you're engaging those users and making sure that they have that ability to give feedback for you to capture it and for you to act on it, then you are essentially driving change at the same time, and you're involving your organization in the process, which is really important. So yeah, look, I'm a full believer that change doesn't need to be difficult provided we plan for it. And I think at FCM, over the course of this year in particular, we've really done a lot to invest in how we support customers on that.
Totally. And just on the customer side, I think the plan, the feedback, and the iteration is so critical. I mean, we're talking about onboarding and then even ongoing, understanding, having feedback, understanding pain points. We've sort of even used this methodology in how we've created a somewhat bank of solutions for our clients as well. To ideas come from problems. Problems aren't actually always bad. If you listen to them, you come up with solutions. And I think that's where you become a good and useful business. And I think ideas can come from anywhere. As we're in over 90 countries. In trying to understand and wrap my head around all the solutions that are out there, there are good ideas that come from any part of the world. And that's something that's great about our business, and being able to sort of harness that power of the collective problem solving, that we do as a business is great. And just continuing that process. And then finally, I think from an implementation to a management standpoint, that innovation never ends. It's just such an ongoing thing. So that I just wanted to sort of round off my bit with that as well. So I'm sure this process continues to keep us very, very interested and engaged and loving what we do, because it never ends.
Yep.
Continuous.
And on that note, I think we will end this call. But great to chat as always, and hopefully in 2021 we get to do this in person again. Exactly.
We can have our old fashioned.
Yeah. All right. Take care, my friend.
All righty, mate. Thanks again.